No one knows exactly when human beings moved into Iowa. Most believe it was after the end of the Ice Age. Dome-shaped conical earthen mounds were built by a mound-building culture as early as 500 BC, or BCE, before Common Era, as far north as the Great Lakes area, and were found across Iowa. In northeast Iowa, the effigy park mounds on the west side of the Mississippi River began later, around 550 AD, or CE Common Era, and ceased around 1200 AD. The present-day St. Louis area was the location of the largest chiefdom in North America at Cahokia that flourished between 900 AD and peaked at 1100 AD with an estimated 10,000 people or more. By 1350 AD, all the people of Cahokia had mysteriously disappeared. By the late 1400s, it appears the Illini Confederation started to repopulate Cahokia. It was located at the confluence area of the Mississippi, Illinois, and Missouri rivers. Cahokia's large four-level center mound, 1,000 feet long, 700 feet wide, and 100 feet high, was the largest man-made structure found north of Mexico. The mound appears to be the focus for the community and business activities. Cahokia served as a huge trading center. In the 1600s, when the French explorers found the northeast woodland tribes in Canada, they spoke the Algonquin root languages and built villages near forests, rivers, and lakes. They also grew crops of squash, beans, and maize or corn near riverbeds, but they did not build mounds. They became more dependent on agriculture rather than hunting and gathering, enabling them to live in villages with bark lodges and to use bark canoes. The other protohistoric group, known as the nomadic plains tribes, who spoke the Siouan root languages, used future Iowa land mainly as hunting grounds and encampments. These tribes followed the bison herds, or made hunting trips to the west of Iowa, most using horses left by Spanish explorers in the 1500s to carry their belongings and teepees. The migration patterns and relationships of these groups with earlier tribes are still being researched. The complexity of understanding migrations of the first humans to the Americas has changed from the long-accepted consensus that the first and only migration to the Americas had occurred from Siberia via the Bering Strait to Alaska about 12,000 years ago, around the end of the Ice Age. More recently discovered sites and carbon dating have changed this long-held consensus. A site discovered at Clovis, New Mexico in 1929 was carbon dated to 13,100 years ago and found to have fluted spear points. The Clovis spear points could not be traced back to Siberia. Many other Clovis-type sites were found with these fluted points. The Clovis Point population was accepted then by most as the first inhabitants in the Americas, but did not discount the later migration to Alaska from Siberia. For unknown reasons, the Clovis population disappeared 12,800 years ago. In the 1970s, when a pre-Clovis site discovered in Monteverde, Chile was carbon dated back to 14,500 years ago, and no Clovis points were found, it gave strong indication that another migration may have happened from Pacific Polynesia by sea. Another site in the 1980s under the coastal waters of Tallahassee, Florida, with evidence of human existence dating back 15,500 years ago, more than 2,000 years earlier than the Clovis fluted spearmakers, again challenged the existing consensus. This pre-Clovis site used a different technique of making laurel leaf points that were finely crafted and similar to Europe's Solutrean culture that flourished in France and Spain between 24 and 17,000 years ago. This site, along with several other sites, like the Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in Pennsylvania and Cactus Hill in Virginia, suggest a likelihood of earlier migrations from Europe. The excavation from 1998 to 2006 of the largest pre-Clovis site at Buttermilk Creek in Austin, Texas, with 15,528 artifacts, was dated back to 15,500 years ago. This evidence again concluded that the Clovis Point humans were not the first inhabitants of the Americas. Coastlines were as much as 400 feet lower during the Ice Age, when glaciers held much of the Earth's water, so evidence of even earlier sites with humans may never be found. No one knows with certainty who the first human inhabitants were in the Americas. There is now general agreement among researchers that first humans probably arrived in the Americas perhaps as early as 25 to 30,000 years ago. It appears these earlier groups disappeared for unknown reasons. The 2002 DNA findings reported by Dr. Spencer Wells in his book Journey of Man, A Genetic Odyssey, demonstrated the importance of DNA studies to understand migration and relationships.
A quote from Dr. Spencer Wells, 2014. San Bushmen of Namibia, Africa, retain the closer genetic lineages to the earliest humans. We, humans, were living as a very small group of hunter-gatherers out in savannas of likely eastern Africa, so present-day Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania. And it was in that kind of crucible of East African hunter-gatherer society that all of the modern human characteristics arose. A quote from Dr. Spencer Wells, 2014. DNA research is showing connections among all current humans living around the world today, including the current North American tribes.
Although more research continues, human beings appear to be all one family whose ancestors migrated out of Africa 100,000 years ago.